Take a bite out of the winter cold by slipping your foot into the jaws of these hilarious shark slipper socks. The lined slipper section, including the teeth, comes off the machine shaped and fully assembled. So all you need to do is add the fins and bulgy eyes. The companion pattern includes step-by-step instructions for sizes ranging from a child small to an adult extra large. Just follow the link in the description below to start your undersea adventure. This project is suitable for any flatbed, bulky, or mid-gauge machine as no electronics or rubber are required. I've just brought 20 needles out to the hold position. E-wrap these needles, and I'll join you when I get to the end. I'm going to thread up my carriage. My carriage is set to knit in both directions because I want these to get knit off on the next row. And I'm going to hang my cast-on comb just so my stitches don't roll off. My normal tension for this pattern is 7. However, bring it down to 6, one full number tighter for the lining. And knit one row. Throughout this pattern, I'm going to be weaving in my ends. As you go to weave in the end, pull the needles to hold and E-wrap at least 5 to 8 needles with the yarn tail. Depending on the carriage setting, you may need to push the needles back into upper work position if you want them to knit off on the next row. You will see a variety of examples throughout this video. And here's my second row. Once the yarn tail is secured with a row of knitting, trim the end to a 1/2 inch. The tail will settle in after the first wash. Knit 2 more rows, so that there is a total of 4 rows for an adult size. Now, set the carriage to hold to start the short rowing sequence for the heel. Bring the first needle on the side closest to the carriage out to hold, and knit 1 row. See how the yarn wraps the held needle automatically? Now I'm going to bring out the needle closest to the carriage on the left side, then knit 1 row. The held needle on the left is also wrapped. And I'm going to continue to do this until I have a total of 6 stitches. That's 6 needles remaining in work position. Because the knitting is building up in the center, the work will not knit off easily. So I'm going to add a little bit of weight to the center part. Okay, I have 6 stitches still in work, and I'm ending on the right. So now I'm going to start returning stitches to work. Bring the needle on the right closest to the working needles, that's on the same side as the carriage. Bring it back into upper work position and knit 1 row. Then on the left do the same and knit 1 row. Now repeat this until all the needles are back in work position. This sequence of going in and out will be worked 6 times throughout the slipper to create the heels, toes, and the jaws. Now that all my needles are back in working position, remove the weights, combs, and any clips, and let's take a look. Here is the heel. It's like a little pocket. Once we complete each short rowing sequence, which creates the pocket, you can move the weight behind the knitting to keep it from rolling off. Before I move on, I am going to mark the end stitch on both sides. This is where I also set my row counter back to 0. I'm going to knit 26 rows for the sole of the lining. There's my 26 rows. I am marking the end stitches of this last row also. Now I'm going to begin shaping the toe, just like I did the heel. First, bring out the needle closest to the carriage to hold and knit 1 row. Then repeat the sequence, alternating sides until 6 stitches remain in work position. So there's my center 6 stitches. Bring the first needle into upper work position on the same side as the carriage and knit 1 row. And continue to do this, alternating from side to side until all needles are back in work. There we go! Now we have our second pocket made, which is the toe of the lining. Now we're going to knit 26 more rows, but I want to start joining as I go. This marked stitch indicates where to begin. As I look at the edge of the knitting, I have loops and I have little knots. Loop, knot, loop, knot. And so I'm going to take the first loop by the marker on this side, picking it up from the outside in and hang it on the end needle. Then I'm going to go to the left side, and once again, here's the loop and there's the knot. So I'm going to hang the marked edge loop on the edge needle in work. Knit 2 rows. This is called joining as you go. Here's the loop that we just used to seam pulling up into the stitches. There's the knot right there. And here's the next loop. The loop is what I'm hanging. Then on this side, here's the one that was just done. It's pulling out of that stitch. And here's the next loop right there. Hang that one. Notice I inserted the transfer tool from the outside in and hung the stitch on the end needle on that side. Knit 2 rows and continue until just before the next marker is reached. So that one was used. Here's the loop I'm looking for. See how it's right before my next marker and right here. Worked out perfect. Make sure that the marker doesn't get in the way, and you can remove them if they do get in the way. Knit 2 rows. That makes 26 rows, and I have 26 on my row counter. So that's how you join the instep to the sole. And look how nice it looks on both sides. We've just completed the instep. I also want to do one more thing. Pick up the purl bump from the edge stitch on the right and hang it on the next stitch on the right. I just did an increase. Pick up the purl bump from the left edge stitch and hang it on the next needle to the left. Knit 2 rows. So I've just increased 1 on each side of the last row. Then I'm going to pick up the purl bumps again on the end stitches and hang them on the adjacent needle on the outside. All I'm doing is increasing 1 stitch on each edge. Knit 2 more rows. So now I have 24 stitches for this particular size. At this point I'm going to leave myself a 10-inch yarn tail and cut my yarn. Knit several rows with waste yarn and remove it from the machine. My slipper lining is made. To begin the lower mouth, teeth, and jaw section, first take the needles that held the increases out of work to return to 20 needles. Then return to the cast-on row, which is the E-wrapped row on the lining. With the purl side facing, hang the 20 loops from the E-wrap stitches right onto the needles, starting on one end and working to the other. Before I move on, thread a darning needle with ravel cord or thin cotton yarn and mark the rehung E-wrapped row by drawing the needle between the stitches on this row. We will need to find this row later. The carriage is still on main tension -1 for this part. Leave a short yarn tail and knit 10 rows, making sure to weave in the ends as you go. Start taking needles out of work again by putting them in hold. And I'm going to work all the way down until 8 stitches remain in work position for this adult size. I'm down to 8 stitches in work position. Now I'm going to end my yarn and weave in this end also. These needles already have stitches on them. On the next row, all the stitches will knit, so I'm just going to E-wrap the center ones so I have just 2 wraps on each needle. I've just switched my carriage back to knit in both directions. With white, knit 1 row. All the needles knit. Then take this yarn tail and weave it in to get rid of it. Knit another row. So now I have all those stitches knit off. Now trim off the yarn tails to a 1/2 inch to neaten things up. Starting with the rightmost needle, bring every other needle across the bed out to hold. Transfer all the stitches from the needles that we brought out to the hold position. This means transfer the stitch on every other needle 1 needle to the left. Bring the empty needles, including that one on the end, back into work position. Then knit 2 more rows. See how all the needles knit and are now in work position? You can end the white at this point, leaving yourself enough yarn to weave in. Then come down to the first row of white right here. And I'm going to hang each stitch of that row of white on the working needles. It forms a little mini skinny little pin tuck with picots on it. You do it all the way across the bed right down to the end. Now see how that's going to roll up? This is where we add a little bit of weight, right here. And we're going to bring these needles out because we also have to weave this end in at the same time that we close those teeth. We're going to put our carriage back into hold. We're going to increase our tension to the main tension, which is 7, and we're going to thread the carriage with our underbelly color. Arrange the needles to continue the short row sequence. Leave the center 8 stitches in work position and bring all others out to hold position. In addition to that, bring the needle closest to the working needles on the right into upper work position. Knit 1 row. Notice these didn't knit over here, and that's okay, but we do have to weave in this end too. So I'm pulling out our needles to hold just so I can wrap them without hurting myself. I brought 6 needles out and they all have to be returned to upper work position because that's the position in which they will knit off on the next row. Then bring this one into upper work position also. We've got a lot going on these couple of rows, but as soon as we get through this, it makes more sense. Now that the row is knit, trim the ends to a 1/2 inch. And we're ready to put the next stitch into work and continue to bring 1 stitch back into work alternating sides until we have all the stitches back in work. So I have all my stitches back in work, so I can take these weights off, and I can hang 1 weight on the back of the knitting just like before so it doesn't roll off. Then we will knit 10 more rows. Those 10 rows match this part of this back flap, which is the lower jaw. So knit the 10 rows. Now I have my 10 rows. Remember how I had picked up the loops along the E-wrap? You could hardly see that row now if you hadn't marked it. Well, return to the row just above it and hang the end stitch on the end working needle, and then hang each of the stitches of that row to the remaining needles in work. Once we have hung all the stitches, the row marker is useless, so we can just take it out. Now, knit 4 more rows. To help the carriage along, bring all the needles to hold and switch the carriage back to knit in both directions. Knit 1 row, then switch the carriage back to hold and knit rows 2, 3, and 4. The next part that we do is the heel of the slipper. Bring the stitch out to hold closest to the carriage and knit 1 row. And we're going to continue to do the heel just like the lining heel, except the tension is at the main tension. We are working the short row sequence until 6 stitches remain in work position in the center. Then we're going to bring them right back out again until all the stitches are in work position. So there you see, our heel is made. Then we're going to do the sole of a slipper. We're going to mark the stitch on each edge. Now knit 26 rows. At the end of the sole, also mark the edge stitches on each side. Now we're going to repeat the short rowing sequence yet again until we have 6 stitches to create the toe of the slipper. So there's my 6. Bring the carriage off to the right to finish that part of the short row sequence. Now we're at the tip of the toe. This is where we end the belly color by cutting the yarn. But before you go on, bring the center 6 stitches out to hold, E-wrap them with the yarn tail to weave the end in, and push them into upper work position. Then bring 1 more needle on the right to upper work. Now with the dark gray, knit 1 row. See how they knit just the center stitches? I'm E-wrapping these to weave in this end on the next row. Just like before, continue to bring the stitches back into work position one at a time. and knit 1 row. Repeat this until the toe is finished. All my needles are back in work. That means the toe is finished. When you knit the instep, you will be joining it to the sole of the slipper. And I'm going to go from the outside in into that marked stitch and hang it on the edge stitch on both sides. Reset the row counter to 0 to keep track of these rows. Then knit 2 rows. Skip the knot. Pick up the next loop, hang it. Here's my next stitch on this side, and I'm going to continue until I've worked my 26 rows. So we've just joined the sole to the instep, or in other words, the underbelly to the back. We're going to continue with the main color, but need to do the increase again. Just like we did before, increase 1 by picking up the purl bump from the edge stitch and placing it on the next needle to the outside. Pick up the purl bump on this side and put it on the next needle. Knit 2 rows. Increase 1 more on each side and knit 2 more rows for this size slipper. I'll meet you then. Now mark the center 2 stitches. This is where the dorsal fin will go later. Return to the row with the waste yarn and roll the waste yarn forward to expose the purl side. We're going to pick up the row of lining stitches right above the waste knitting and hang them on the working needles. In this case, we have 24 stitches and we'll go right across the row from one end to the other. Now you don't want to take your waste yarn out at this point yet because the stitches are not closed. In order to close the stitches, you have to hang this loop, which we will do in a few minutes. Now that the stitches are all hung, knit 10 more rows with the main color. Begin the short rowing sequence again by bringing the stitches out alternating sides until we have 2 needles in work in the middle. Now we're going to continue to bring the stitches back into work until only 6 stitches are back in work in the center. Now we have 6 stitches back in work and the carriage is on the right. Bring 1 needle on the right edge closest to the working needles to upper work position. Then bring all of the needles on the left to upper work position. Knit across the row. Okay, now before I move any further, I'm going to bring these needles to hold and get this end woven in because I started a new ball of yarn. That wasn't intentional, I just ran out of yarn. Okay, so now that end is taken care of. These needles should remain in upper work position, and all of the ones on the right are going to be in upper work position. Knit 2 rows. Notice the carriage is on the left now. Quickly E-wrap the end as it is not necessary, but make sure to move those needles back to upper work position so that they get knit on the next row. The teeth are done at a tighter tension and so is the inside of the jaw. So set the tension to 6. I'm going to hand feed the white just like I did before. Knit 4 rows to start the teeth. But before I finish those 4 rows, I want to weave this end in too. Now that it's wrapped, bring these needles into upper work position so they knit off. And that's my 4th row. My carriage is on my left, but I can trim these yarn tails that were woven in. And they're gone. Starting on my right, I'm going to pull out every other needle to hold position. Then starting with the end needle, transfer the stitches from these needles. 1 needle to the left, just like I did before. Here's the trick. Pull out the needles all the way out. That way you know if you handled them or not. Now bring the empty needles back into work position and knit 2 more rows. The carriage is on the left. I'm going to hang the first row of white just like I did the last time I made teeth. Knit 1 more row in white to close the teeth, and that will put the carriage on the right. Here we go. I can end the white now and just like before weave this end in. Then put the needles in the upper work position so they'll knit on the next row, or whenever I get there. And now I'm going to stop and do the setup for the mouth. So first thread the carriage with red yarn. The tension should still be at 6 for the mouth, which is the main tension minus 1. I'm in hold position. Rearrange the needles so that the center 6 are in working position and everything else is in hold position. We're going to start the sequence of bringing them back into work at this point. Move the needle closest to the working needles on the right into the upper work position and knit 1 row. Push the needle on the left closest to the center working needle into upper work position. In the meantime, bring the center needles back out and weave in this end. Make sure to return the needles to upper work position so they knit off on the next row. Knit 1 row and continue to bring the remaining needles back to work just like before until all the needles are back in work position. Now that the mouth is finished, simply knit 10 rows to complete the jaw. Now return to the waist knitting. With your transfer tool, pick up the bottom loop of red just below the edge of the waist knitting and hang the loop on the needles. It is important to catch every one of these loops because this process closes the stitches, so when the waste yarn is removed, the knitting will not come undone. Let's bring the needles all out to hold position and remove the red from the carriage, because we are ready to bind off around the gate pegs. To do so, put the feeder yarn around the adjacent gate peg. Place the hook on the latch tool in the hook of the first needle and transfer the stitches to the latch tool by pushing the needle out of work. Make sure the stitches are behind the latch, then catch the yarn with the hook and pull it through the stitches on the latch tool loosely. And that is how to bind off around the gate peg. Repeat this process, making sure the yarn is around each of the gate pegs before beginning to bind off the next stitch. It keeps the finished edge comfortably loose. Once we get across all the stitches, we can just pop it off the gate pegs. Leave a 10-inch yarn tail for finishing. You can remove the waste yarn now. All the fins are worked exactly the same way. They just start with a different number of needles. For the adult sizes, use 9 needles for the large fin and 7 for the small fin. Start by E-wrapping the needles, hang a weight or cast-on comb, set the tension to the main tension minus 1, set the carriage to knit in both directions, and knit 2 rows. Set the carriage to hold and begin with the short rowing sequence, like before. Repeat this process until 1 needle remains in work. Then begin to bring the needles back into upper work position, one at a time, until all the needles are in work. Hang the E-wrap stitches and bind off around the gate pegs, as shown previously. Make 1 large fin and 3 small fins for each slipper. When the slipper comes off the machine, this is what you have: 2 toes, 2 heels, this is the lower mouth, and this is the upper mouth as it has the bigger teeth. Push the toe lining into the slipper toe. Then you push the heel lining into the heel of the slipper, which is part of the underbelly. Notice the slight indentation right here? That is a reference point as we assemble the slipper. I call it the transition row. Since you can only get into the inside of the slipper through the small openings, finishing needs to be completed in a specific order. If you didn't seam the lining seam and the outside seams as you go, you need to do that now. The seam should extend from this point to about 1 inch below the transition row. Since you will only need a red 10-inch yarn tail on each side, weave in all other ends if not done already. Place the front end of the dorsal fin, the largest fin, right in between the markers at the transition row and straight down the center back. With the yarn tails from the fin, seam it into place using the mattress stitch on both sides. Now find the center point at the tip of the tail and mark it. Align one of the small fins with the marker and the dorsal fin and sew into place, making sure not to catch any of the lining. Next, flatten out the face. The center stitches are marked as a guide. I like to place the eyes on a row just a little forward of the end of the teeth. Divide the width of the row in thirds and move the markers to these points. Then with black, embroider the bulgy eyes without catching the lining. Sandwich the side fin between the back and the belly. The rear edge of the fin should butt up against the side seam along the instep and end close to the transition or a little in front of it. Sew the fin into place and continue to seam the back and belly together, all the way up to the teeth. Now attach the other side fin and seam the other side. Finally, with the red yarn tails, seam the lining together on both sides. Nice, warm, and fun. Here are the shark slipper socks. Da-da, da-da. It's a fish frenzy! I can't help myself. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell to receive notifications of upcoming videos and events. Happy machine knitting!